The phone on the polished ebony desk vibrated, a delicate classical tune I had chosen to signal private calls. The screen displayed a series of numbers I knew by heart, despite not having dialed or received a call from it in over 25 years. My parents' home number. A sad, slightly ironic smile crossed my lips as I leaned back in my fine leather chair, my eyes still fixed on the panoramic windows of my office on the top floor of the Vance Innovations building. Below, New York City stretched out, a million twinkling lights like an artificial galaxy, a testament to what I had built from the ashes of a painful past. Finally, the circle is closed, I thought. A strange feeling, both distant and familiar, swirling in my chest. Memories, like an old film, suddenly flashed back to that rainy night nearly 3 decades ago. The night I, Eleanor Vance, then 23 years old, was chased out of the house I once called home by the people I loved most. With only a small suitcase of old clothes, 2 empty hands, and a heart broken into 100 pieces by betrayal and injustice. Now that Eleanor Vance was a self-made billionaire, a name spoken with respect in the harsh world of technology, a woman who had proven that fate is not preordained, but created. And they were calling me. After all those years of silence and distance, they were calling. I let the phone ring a few more times before picking it up, my voice so calm it surprised even me. Eleanor Vance speaking. On the other end of the line, there was a long silence. Then a shaky, hesitant voice, much older than I remembered, said, "Ellie, Eleanor, it's me, baby." Mom. That call was like a needle pricking lightly on an old scar, no longer as painful as before, but still enough to remind me of its existence. 25 years ago, the atmosphere in the Vance family's small house in suburban New Jersey seemed warmer and more festive than ever. My parents, Richard and Susan Vance, were celebrating their 30th wedding anniversary. A milestone, my mother had prepared a lavish dinner. I was a recent college graduate with a degree in computer science, working part-time at a small software company, and pouring my energy and my meager savings into my own startup, an idea for interactive educational software that I believed would make a difference. My older brother Michael was 5 years older, married with a family, but his career had been a series of failures and unaccounted-for debts. Yet in my parents' eyes, Mikey was the golden boy, the hope of the family, the one who would make it big someday. Dinner began with toasts and forced jokes. I could sense the tension lurking beneath the surface of the harmony. My mother glanced at my father with concern, and he tried to appear cheerful, but his shoulders were weighed down by an invisible burden. Michael, as usual, was the center of attention, talking endlessly about the new business opportunities he had discovered, the flowery words masking the hollowness inside. Then, as a matter of course, after dessert was served, my dad cleared his throat, his expression serious. "We have an announcement to make," he said, looking at Michael and me. "After much consideration, we've decided to mortgage this house to raise some capital for Mikey, to invest in his new project. This is a great opportunity not to be missed." My throat tightened. Mortgage the house? The only house, the place that held so many memories, was the most valuable asset my parents had after years of hard work. I looked at Michael. He had a smug smile, his eyes glinting with triumph. I knew Michael's projects. They always started with high promises and ended with huge debts that my parents had to shoulder. "Mom, Dad," I tried to stay calm, "I think you should reconsider. A mortgage is a big decision. At the very least, can you show me Mikey's detailed business plan? To make sure it's really viable and financially secure for our family when we retire." Silence filled the room. My mother looked at me reproachfully, as if I had said something deeply disrespectful. My father frowned, his displeasure evident. But the one who reacted most vehemently was Michael. "Eleanor!" he roared, his face red with anger. "What do you mean? Do you doubt me? You've always been like that, always jealous of me. You don't want to see me succeed, do you? Mikey, I didn't mean it like that, I tried to explain. I'm just worried about my parents. Are you worried about your parents or yourself? Michael interrupted, his voice full of sarcasm. Or are you afraid that if I succeed, you will no longer be their only good, smart daughter? His words were like knives cutting into my heart. I have never been jealous of Michael. I just wish he would take more responsibility for his life and stop taking advantage of his parents' kindness. The argument grew more and more heated, and then Michael delivered the fatal blow, a vicious lie that changed my life forever. A few weeks earlier, a sizable chunk of the family's savings, about $15,000 that my parents had set aside for roof repairs and an emergency retirement fund, had disappeared. My parents were devastated and worried, but they had no clue. Little did I know that Michael, my beloved older brother, had embezzled the money to pay off his massive gambling debts from another failed investment. Now, in front of his parents, Michael began to cry pitifully. His tears flowed, his voice full of fake pain. I don't want to say this, but I saw... He hesitated, looking at me with accusing eyes. I saw Eleanor sneaking around your safe a few times that week. I didn't think anything of it at first, but now... Then he hinted that I was in need of a large sum of money for my startup project, which I had accidentally mentioned in a phone call with a close friend, and Michael had overheard. He also remembered that I had been coming home late and had mysterious expenses, which were actually money I had spent on specialized books and old computer parts for my own research. All these trivial details, through Michael's mouth, suddenly became evidence against me. Mom, Dad, Michael sobbed. I knew Eleanor was ambitious, but I never expected her to do something so terrible. Steal money from her own parents. I was stunned, unable to believe my ears. The sky seemed to fall before my eyes. No, I didn't do it, I screamed, my voice cracking with panic and anger. Michael, how could you lie like that? Mom, Dad, please believe me. But my parents, who had always trusted Michael blindly, and the shock of the missing money, and now their beloved son's belated confession, were completely convinced. They did not give me a chance to explain. The disappointment, the anger, the pain of being betrayed by the daughter they once loved overwhelmed all reason. My mother, Susan, the woman I had always respected for her gentleness and diligence, now looked at me with a strange, disgusted look. She clutched her chest, tears welling up in her eyes. Eleanor, how could you? How could you treat us like this, after all we have sacrificed for you? Her voice trembled, choked. My father, Richard, a man of few words but always the strong pillar of the family, his face was red with anger and disappointment. He stood up and pointed his finger at me. I don't have a daughter like you, a poisonous snake. You stole our money, our hard-earned money. Get out of this house. Get out of my sight. His words were like sledgehammers hitting me. Michael's wife, Sarah, who had been silently observing the dinner, now looked at me with caution and a little pity, but she did not dare to speak up to defend me against her father-in-law's rage and her husband's determination. Perhaps she was afraid, or simply chose to protect her small family. In that moment, I was completely alone. But I didn't do it, I sobbed, trying to hold on to a tiny bit of hope. Please listen to my explanation. I was wronged. What else is there to explain? My father roared. The evidence is clear. You are an ungrateful son, a thief. He turned to Michael, his voice artificially soft. Mikey, don't be sad. We know you're sensible. Luckily you found out. Otherwise, we would have been fooled to the core. Michael bowed his head, his expression painful. But in his eyes, I saw a flash of gloating. That night, New Jersey rain poured down, cold and unforgiving, just like my family had been to me. My father threw my small suitcase out onto the porch, containing only a few old clothes and a few books. My mother stood in the doorway, her face turned away, her shoulders shaking with suppressed sobs. Michael stood behind them, arms crossed, looking at me triumphantly. "Go away," my father said, his voice cold. "Don't ever come back here again." The door slammed shut in my face, locking me out in the rain and darkness. My cries mingled with the rain, despair and pain. I wandered in the night, my thin shirt not enough to cover my body that was shivering from the cold and shock. I didn't know where to go. I didn't have many friends, and I didn't want to be a burden to them with this tragic situation. The feeling of betrayal, injustice, and abandonment by the people I loved the most burned my heart. The image of my parents turning their backs, Michael's gloating eyes, haunted me endlessly. The following months were the darkest days of my life. I slept in cheap, damp motels, sometimes on park benches if I ran out of money. I did all kinds of manual labor to make ends meet, waiting tables in a bustling night spot, washing dishes in a Chinese restaurant, cleaning for a few well-off families. The meager wages were just enough to keep me from starving. But no matter how hard it was, I never gave up on my idea for educational software. It was the only ray of hope, the small flame that kept me from collapsing in the long, dark night. At my lowest point, when I was almost ready to give up, fate brought me to Mrs. Isabella Rossi. She owned a small, cozy Italian bakery tucked away on a side street. Mrs. Rossi, an Italian immigrant with white hair tied back in a bun and kind, experienced eyes, saw something in the thin, pale young girl who was applying for a job washing dishes in her shop. Maybe it was the determination in my tired eyes, or the intelligence I exuded from the way I answered her questions. She offered me a job in the bakery, not only washing dishes, but also helping her bake. And more importantly, she gave me a small loft above the shop to live in. "Little girl," she said to me in her Italian accent, "life sometimes throws us lemons. It's our job to find a way to make good lemonade." Mrs. Rossi's simple words were like a warm stream of water that soothed my frozen soul. During the day, I worked hard at the bakery, learning how to make fragrant bread and delicate pastries. The smell of flour, butter, and caramelized sugar mixed together to create a warm, safe space that I had long lost. At night, after the bakery closed, I would scribble on my old laptop that I had bought with the first money I saved from the bakery. The dim light from the screen shone on my face as I diligently wrote each line of code for my educational software. Mrs. Rossi would occasionally bring me a hot cup of espresso and a few homemade cookies, quietly placing them on the table and smiling encouragingly. She didn't ask much about my past, but her presence and kindness gave me the strength to continue. Years passed. My software, Learn Spark, grew from a fledgling idea to a full-fledged one. I started by testing it in local, underprivileged schools for free. The response was overwhelming. Kids loved the interaction. Teachers appreciated its effectiveness. Then one day, a small article in a local newspaper about LearnSpark caught the attention of David Lee, a prominent tech angel investor who was always looking for groundbreaking ideas and passionate founders. David saw great potential in LearnSpark, and more importantly, he saw my passion, intelligence, and extraordinary willpower. He decided to invest. That was the turning point. With David's capital and advice, Vance Innovations was born. LearnSpark was fully developed, expanded, and quickly dominated the educational software market. From there, the company continued to launch many other breakthrough technology products, making Vance Innovations a multi-billion-dollar corporation. And I, Eleanor Vance, the girl who was kicked out of the house with nothing, has now become one of the youngest self-made female billionaires in America. I will never forget Mrs. Rossi. She is still there, in her small bakery, even though I have repeatedly asked her to take a break and let me take care of her. She just smiles, saying that baking is her joy. I bought the whole block of houses where the bakery was, renovated it to be more spacious, but still kept the cozy atmosphere of the Rossi Bakery, as a silent thank you. And now, 25 years later, my mother's voice rang out over the phone, pulling me back to reality. "Mom," I replied, trying to keep my voice from betraying too much emotion. "What's wrong?" Your father isn't well," her mother's voice faltered. And, and we're having a hard time, Ellie. A hard time." I was silent, waiting. I knew this was not simply a call to ask about my health. Can we see you, Ellie?" Mom continued, her voice almost pleading. "Just for a moment, to talk." A moment of hesitation. The past came rushing back, bringing with it pain and bitterness. But then, another, stronger feeling arose: curiosity, and perhaps something like a willingness to confront. It was time. "Okay," I said. "Tomorrow, 10 o'clock, at my office. My secretary will send you the address." I hung up the phone and took a deep breath. David Lee, who was not only my business partner but also my closest friend, the only person who knew the whole story of my past, walked into the office at that moment. He looked at me, his eyes questioning. "They called," I said briefly. David nodded, not needing to ask further. "Are you ready?" "I think so," I replied, a small smile playing on my lips. After all, I've been waiting for this moment for 25 years. The next morning, at exactly 10 o'clock, my secretary announced their arrival. I asked her to invite them into the small conference room I had prepared. David sat beside me, as a silent support. The door opened. My parents entered, followed by Michael. Time had not been kind to them. My father, Richard, a once tall, strong man, was now hunched over. His hair was thin and white. His face was lined with wrinkles. He walked with a limp, leaning on a cane. My mother, Susan, was also much older. Her eyes were sunken and tired. Their clothes looked old and shabby. Michael, the mastermind of all the tragedies, looked haggard and obese. His eyes were scowl, discontent, and a little scared when he saw me. They were overwhelmed by the elegance and modernity of my office, where every detail exuded success and power. The contrast between this scene and their current situation could not have been more stark. My mother burst into tears as soon as she saw me. Tears rolled down her wrinkled cheeks. "Ellie, honey," she stuttered, unable to form words. My father stood still, head bowed, the cane in his hand shaking. His face was one of utter shame and regret. Michael stood sullenly behind them, trying to appear indifferent, but his clenched fists and averted eyes betrayed his inner turmoil. I invited them to sit down, my voice steady and professional, without a hint of tremor or obvious emotion. "Hi, Dad. Hi, Mom. Hi, Michael." The room was silent for a moment, broken only by my mother's sobs. Finally, she spoke. She told of their difficult years after I left. Michael, after his parents mortgaged their house to lend him money, continued to burn through that money on unrealistic projects. Not only did he not make any money, he also incurred more debt. His parents' house, their only asset, was eventually repossessed by the bank because of Michael's unpaid loans. Now they were homeless, living hand to mouth with the meager help of distant relatives who were also not very well off. My father's health was deteriorating, partly due to old age, partly due to the repeated shocks and anxiety and sadness. Throughout his mother's story, Michael would occasionally interject, trying to blame circumstances, bad luck, swindlers for his failure. He never once admitted his own fault. I listened, not interrupting. My face showed no particular emotion. David sat beside me, silently observing. When my mother ended the story with a heartfelt plea, "Ellie, dear, we know we have wronged you so much, but please have mercy. Help us just this once. He and his father can't take it anymore." At this point, I spoke. My voice was still calm and clear, but there was a weight to it that made all three of them listen in silence. "I remember that rainy night so clearly, Dad. Mom," I began, looking each of them in the eye. "I remember every accusation, every look. I remember being cast out by my own family, thrown out into the street like a criminal. My mother sobbed again. My father bowed his head even lower, his thin shoulders shaking. I also know, I continued, my eyes shifting to Michael, that I didn't steal that $15,000. I know what you spent it on, Michael. Gambling debts, all-night parties, those investments you brag about but are really just scams. Michael jerked, his face pale. What are you talking about? He stuttered, but the panic in his eyes was unmistakable. I'm not talking nonsense, Michael, I replied, my voice cold. After I left home, it took me many years to investigate and find out the truth. And the truth is, you are the one who pushed this family to the brink, not just once, but many times. I turned to look at my parents. Do you know how I lived during those years? What jobs did I have to do to survive? How many sleepless nights, humiliation and despair did I have to endure? I didn't go into detail, but my words were enough for them to picture that miserable picture. We know we were wrong, Ellie, my mother sobbed. Please forgive us. Forgive our blindness. Forgive? I repeated the word, a sad smile playing on my lips. You know, I learned to forgive a long time ago. Not for you, not for Michael, but for myself. I forgive so I can be at peace, so I can let go of the past and move on. Because if I keep holding on to that hatred, the one who will suffer the most is me. Silence fell again. They looked at me, waiting for the verdict. I'll help you, I said, and a glimmer of hope flashed in Susan's eyes. I'll get you a small, comfortable apartment and give you enough monthly living expenses to live comfortably without worrying about money. I'll make sure Dad gets the best medical care. Oh, Ellie, thank you. Thank you. My mother was overjoyed, wanting to take my hand, but I gently stepped back a little. But, I continued, my voice firm, I'm not doing this out of old family sentiment. I'm doing this out of basic human compassion for those who were once blood relatives, and so that my parents won't become a burden to society. And there's one condition. My eyes locked on Michael's. All of this help will be done through a trust fund managed by my attorney. Michael, you will not receive a penny from me, and you will not be allowed to live in that apartment with your parents. You are an adult. You are responsible for your own life. Michael was about to say something angrily, but my cold gaze made him shut up. And about that forgiveness you just mentioned, I continued, my voice softening a little, but still maintaining my distance. I said, I forgive. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and it doesn't mean we can go back to the way things were. Trust, once lost, is hard to regain, if not impossible. The door to my heart is closed to that past. I stood up and looked at them, one last time. My current career and life are built on tears, grievances, and tireless efforts over the past 25 years. I won't let anyone or anything ruin it. I hope you understand that. David politely saw them to the door. My father, before leaving, turned to look at me, his old eyes filled with tears. He said nothing, only bowed his head deeply, a bow that expressed belated but perhaps the most sincere remorse I had ever seen from him. My mother was still crying, but there was perhaps a hint of relief mixed in her tears. Only Michael left, looking resentful and defeated. After they left, I stood alone in the large office, looking out at the city changing in the morning light. A strange sense of relief spread through me. The burden of the past, though not completely gone, seemed to have been largely lifted. I no longer felt hatred or resentment. There was only peace and a little pity for what had been lost. I did not seek revenge, nor did I blindly forgive. I chose a middle path, a path of reason, of self-control, and of conditional compassion. Justice, for me, was not seeing them suffer, but seeing myself standing firm, successful, and happy after all that had happened. Their belated remorse and Michael's helplessness were perhaps also a form of appropriate punishment. In the days that followed, I continued with my life, Vance Innovations was still going strong, and ambitious new projects awaited me. I devoted more time to philanthropy, especially setting up a fund to support young women from disadvantaged backgrounds who want to start a career in technology, so that they don't have to go through the bitterness I had experienced. David has always been by my side, a friend, a partner, a confidant. We find joy in work, in trips to discover new lands, and in quiet evenings sharing thoughts and dreams. Mrs. Rossi, with her gentle smile, still makes the most delicious cakes in the world in her small bakery, where I often visit to find a bit of peace and warmth of the past. My lawyer occasionally reports on how my parents are doing. They are living peacefully in their new apartment. My father's health is improving. They have stopped trying to contact me. Perhaps they understand that it is for the best. As for Michael, I hear he is still struggling. Nothing has changed. It was his choice. I look back on my journey, not with sadness, but with pride in my strength. I turned tragedy into motivation, pain into strength. I did not let my past define me, but I redefined my future. This morning, standing by the office window, it is not a cold, dark night like the memories of years ago, but a bright dawn. The golden sunlight shines across the city, promising a new day full of energy and hope. I smile, a truly happy and free smile. The past is behind me, where it belongs. A bright future is wide open to welcome me. And I know I have found justice and happiness in my own way, a complete and worthy way.